I'm back. It's me, Tiffany, the Budgetnista Aliche, your favorite financial educator, and we're here with Money Glow Up from Yahoo Finance, where I help you to debunk some of the myths and misunderstandings that you might have about money, honey. You see what I did there? Here's the thing. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how do you financially prepare for the financial unexpected. Here's the thing. People will save for things like shoes. They might save for something medium like a vacation or something big like a house, but they feel a little bit weird about saving for the unexpected. As a result, Bankrate has a study where they found that 6 in 10 U.S. adults feel uncomfortable with their level of emergency savings, and 1 in 4 have no emergency savings whatsoever. That's not cute. With all these adults that feel uncomfortable or who are not saved at all, what are we to do? You don't got to figure out that by yourself, because today in the stew, I have a guest, Tanya Taylor, my friend TT, that's what I call her, not for you. She's going to come into the stew today. She's a financial coach who for 2 decades have not only been helping people to grow wealth, but also to prepare financially for the unexpected. Be on your best behavior. Let's invite Tanya to the stew. Now let's talk about financially preparing for the unexpected. I told y'all I had someone in the stew today. Tanya, welcome to the studio.
Hi, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's back up for a minute, right? So you had spent 2 decades helping people with their finances. That's not how you started out, though. And that's not how you started this work about getting people financially prepared for the financial unexpected. Like, can you take me back? What's your story?
Absolutely. So my story basically is that I came to the U.S. at 16. I was alone. I had $100. And I needed to figure out a way to build wealth because when I came here, I came here thinking that people sort of live a certain lifestyle. And when I came, everyone was living paycheck to paycheck. And I wanted to have a career. I didn't want my life to continue down the path it was. I really wanted to change the trajectory. And so I just started to learn about budgeting at a very early age. So at 16, I was doing my budget. I was saving. I wanted to go back to school to get that career. So I saved up to go back to school. And as I started learning about personal finance, I decided to start teaching people about it. And so by the time I graduated college, I was 25. I was debt-free. I had purchased my own home. And I figured what's next? And what was next for me was that I started an investment club with my friends, and then I just started to teach people in the community about money, about personal finance. My husband and I had opened a tax practice, so we also just started teaching taxes as well. And sort of that's been my life thing that I did outside of my corporate career.
I feel like we're twins. I'm like, oh my gosh, debt-free, 25, buying a home. I'm like, are we twins?
In a way.
So what are some of the biggest areas that you might need an emergency fund in? Because I know you experienced kind of like something traumatic happened to you.
Yes. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I've always been big on emergency fund. And your emergency fund is really to cover all of your necessities that you need for 3 to 6 months, right? And then there is more, though, than just like that 3 to 6 months and sort of what is an emergency. So an emergency might be if your car breaks down and you need to get it fixed, you don't want to pull on your credit card, so you have that money in your emergency fund to pay for that. But for me, when I had my car accident, I did have almost a year of emergency fund.
Okay.
And it got used up so fast because there was other unexpected things that came up for me. Like my daughter became ill and her medical expenses were not covered by insurance, so I had to be paying that. I had to be paying for my medical expenses for therapy because the therapy I was getting was not sufficient. So when we talk about emergency fund, it's really important to have that 3 to 6 months. I say go beyond 6 months anyway.
Same.
But yeah, I feel like 3 to 6 months is just not enough. But let's say you make it to that 6 months, then one of the things that we don't often talk about, and there is a difference, is the emergency fund and the sinking fund too. Because,
I was going to ask you that. What is the difference?
So the difference is your emergency fund is really for things that are real emergencies. I talked about, the car breaking down or something like that. The sinking fund is where, let's say you have this car and you know that after 50,000 miles, you have to change the timing belt. Then you could save for the sinking fund, save for the sinking fund for that. So you know it's anticipated expenses that you are putting in the sinking fund. Whereas for the emergency fund, these are true emergencies that are coming up, which could also be you lose your job. If you lose your job and you don't get a severance package, you probably have to draw on that emergency fund to get some money out of it too.
And so, I mean, I always think I have this like fun saying, it's not so fun, but I say that people are like, well, how can I know what to save for because it's unexpected? I'm like, well, you're an adult, unexpected is going to happen. That's just
Yeah.
adult life. So how do we even start setting aside money for like unexpected or emergencies? Like so many people are so tight right now. So what does that look like?
I always start with, and you're going to love this, start with your budget, right?
We are twins. Lucky, da, da.
Yes,
Ain't
that's
no
right. That's right. It's so true. Like what you preach about having a budget is really important because if you don't know what you have coming in and you don't know what you have coming out, how are you going to even know? Like we're tight because we don't know what we're spending. So I always tell people to start with like your 3-month bank statement, your 3 months credit card, go through that list. I'm telling you, like preaching to the choir, right? And then identify patterns of your spending.
Okay.
So if you're thinking like I'm really tight, maybe you notice that you have all these subscriptions that you're not using, right? Okay. If you cancel those subscriptions, then you're going to find that money that you'll be able to start using for your emergency fund. So the first thing is, gather your expenses, look at the things that your wants and the things that you really have to have in your budget. Okay. And I also tell people like a budget is not meant to be restrictive. Okay. A budget is supposed to guide you in terms of, okay, where am I spending? And where do I need to cut back because I don't need any of these things? Okay. And use that money where you don't need these things. And that's where you're going to start building your emergency fund. And a very good way to do that is to really automate it. Automation, yes. Because when you automate it, you don't have to think about it, right? It's just coming out. You're putting in an account that you don't have easy access to, and you start building it there. And for some people, when they do that budget, it might be $20 a week. But then they continue to find ways to increase that amount so that it becomes maybe $100 a paycheck, I should say, because it depends on how you get paid, right? And then you keep building that up over time.
I like to say automation is the new discipline, baby.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They say like brown is the new black or whatever. I'm like, automation is the new discipline.
It is.
So now that I totally agree, you start with this budget and you see if you can find money in your budget. But where am I putting this money? Under the couch? Are we putting it in a safe in the house? Like,
no. You definitely don't want to do that. So I always tell people like there are a lot of online bank accounts that pay really high interest nowadays. Before, even with an emergency fund, you weren't really getting any interest because no one was paying interest. But now there are high yield savings account. And you can go online, you can just do a Google search for like top high yield savings account. There are some now paying even 5%.
I know.
I'm like, gold. So go ahead and open one of those accounts, have the money automatically come from your paycheck. And if your job does not allow you to do transfers to different accounts, when it goes into your account, have it set up so as soon as you get your paycheck in, it automatically goes to that account. That way you're still not seeing the money. Because there are some people who will say, well, my job only send my money to one bank account.
Yes.
Well, you can set it up your own way so that you are, just having it go.
Oh my gosh, I feel like literally, I'm like, look at my twin. Twin, where have you been? Nobody knows me for real. Like, you are just speaking my language. I love that because you're right. That like, separating your money allows you to have just making your money a little inconvenient.
Yes.
Because inconvenient money gets saved. If it's so readily available, we're going to spend it.
That's right.
High yield savings all the way.
Yeah.
So, some people are like, that sounds like a lot of work. Do I need to have all these spreadsheets? Is there an app that can help me? Or do you have like favorite like online tools or digital tools that that folks can use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because when I work with my clients, it's the same thing too. Like I have those who come in a spreadsheet and I'm an Excel spreadsheet girl.
Me too. Kirsten, we just, what?
I don't know. It's just maybe it's old school, but I'm just like, I can see everything there. So I have my Excel spreadsheet for those who want the spreadsheet and those who don't. Like I refer them to apps. Like there's Mint.com, there's Rocket. There's so many of them, right? And the idea is to figure out the one that's going to work best for you. Okay. And then once you get that app, you got to use the discipline. But you can't just say, okay, I'm just going to put this in the app. I'm not going to look at it. Once you have that app or you have that spreadsheet, you have to take the time, put all the information in and go back and look at it. Okay. Don't just sort of leave it to chance. Like, okay, I did my budget. That's not it. You have to spend time doing that.
Well, same. I love a good spreadsheet. Like, what does your spreadsheet look like? Walk us through, like, how do you break down your expenses and things in your spreadsheet?
Oh, absolutely. So I have wants and needs. That's the first thing. And then within the needs, because I feel like the needs, you don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
You have to have those. So I'll put in all the different needs that I have, which would be like your mortgage or your rent, your utilities, your phone, all that stuff. And then for the wants, then I put all those different categories. But I also break it down a little further where I do like recurring, non-recurring, because one of the things that a lot of people miss is that Christmas is coming. There are birthdays that you celebrate. And if you're not putting those things in your budget, then you're sort of missing out on truly creating a budget. So for me as well, one of the things that I do, there are some people who say you create a 1 month budget or you create budget by the week or whatever. I usually tell my clients to do a 1 year budget.
Okay.
Because when you have a 1 year budget, you're looking out and you're saying, okay, what are some of my expenses that are going to be coming in? And then I have them start planning. So you spend a full year planning for Christmas. You're not just coming in at Christmas and saying, okay, I'm spending $1,000 and then, okay, where's the $1,000 going to come from? But the sinking fund, right? If you put together that sinking fund for Christmas gifts, then you have that in your budget as well.
Now, there's somebody who's watching right now, you, who are like, oh, that's so cute. Cute for you that you have money to set aside. But honestly, I don't have any money in my budget. What can someone do if they just feel like there isn't money available to set aside for emergencies?
So there are a number of things that people can do, and sometimes we don't realize that you can negotiate things. So, for example, your utilities. First of all, when you get your utility bills, it will tell you how much you're spending relative to another household if you're being efficient. So if you're not being efficient, you could identify ways to become more efficient. So if you're like, oh my God, I have no money left in my budget, I'm actually in a deficit. Look in your utility bills, see if you're being efficient. If you're not being efficient, then you could cut back on that. You could also go on a payment plan. Most companies will allow you to go on a level payment plan, and that will also help you on a monthly basis as well.
Oh my goodness, Tanya, such a great conversation, but pause for a moment because we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back. You, stay right there. We're going to pay some bills and we're going to be right back with Tanya. And we are back. Tanya, what were you saying?
As I said before, you're looking to see what you're overspending on. Like a lot of people have all these subscriptions, like we're just not using these subscriptions. So that's something else that we could look at as well. Look for discounts. Like if you drive, you can contact your insurance company to see if they could lower your rate. Like in New York, we have like a 5-hour driving class. If you do that, you get a discount.
Okay.
Take advantage of that discount as well. So there are things that you can do that are maybe if you're tapped out and feel like you could tell me all you want, I can't find anything in my budget. This is where you're going to go and start cutting stuff.
Okay.
Like ask your credit card company if they could lower your interest rate or do a balance transfer where you're going to now start paying off your debt faster. Because if you get a 0% balance transfer card, now don't go and start charging on this card again, but you get that 0% balance transfer card, now you're paying down, you're not paying all of these interests. Eventually, it might take some time, but eventually you'll get some money. And then sometimes the tried and true thing, you get a little side hustle, and you do that to generate some income so that you can start building your emergency fund or do other things that you need to do as well.
Well, I'm West African and I know you're West Indian.
Yeah, I'm Jamaican.
Side hustles are part of the, I'm telling you, this is my Jamaican sister from another mother.
Yes.
So you said something like about like your spreadsheet that you have your needs and your wants. Some people are like, but I need my lashes done. Can we just dive a little deeper into like the true difference between needs and wants?
Yes. So I want to say two things, and one might be controversial, but your needs are the things that if I don't pay my bill, it's going to get cut. My phone's going to get cut off, or my, whatever is going to get cut off, or I'm going to get kicked out of my house.
Okay.
So those are your true needs. But someone like me who loves to travel, who's like, I need to travel.
It's like,
So someone might say that, or I need to get my eyelashes done. What I do, and I say to people as well, is find that one thing that you that really drives you and bring you joy.
Okay.
And that might be a need for you. So what you do is that you don't want to sacrifice that, because that's the thing that's going to drive you to continue to have your budget and to stay disciplined with your budget.
Okay.
But while you're doing that, you have to identify all those other stuff that you're going to say, I need to go out and buy a new dress on sale. That's not really a need. So those are the needs that you're going to say, okay, let me just kind of recalibrate. These are not truly needs. These are just things that I want. So I'm going to put those to the side for now, because these are the goals that I'm working towards, right? I also think that when you have a why and you're like, this is why I'm creating my budget, this is what I want to do, and you start spending in alignment with that goal, then your needs become much more clear to you, because you realize what your needs are that's going to get you to that goal. And then the wants will kind of fall apart. And some of them you're just going to be like, I can't believe I was spending this much on this stuff.
Uber Eats.
Yes. I had a client who spent $8,000 a year on Uber Eats. And when we sat and identified that, she was like, oh my God.
Let me close my mouth a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
Meanwhile, I'm judging, but I'm like, child.
And it's 3 of them. She was in shock because she had never taken stock of how much she was spending.
Ooh, sometimes you just got to take stock.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You mentioned something earlier. I know you were in a really bad car accident.
Yes.
And you were prepared for the 1 year's worth of emergency savings.
Yes.
But then your daughter got sick.
Yes.
And you weren't prepared for those expenses. So there's someone who's listening or watching and they're like, either they're not prepared at all, or they were prepared but not for the fullness of what it was going to require. So what do you do if right now you're in the emergency?
Yes, good question. And just to back up a little bit, when I became disabled, I was actually thinking about leaving my job. So my job offers long-term disability insurance.
Okay.
But that insurance only covers 60% of my salary. So we have to fill that gap for that 40%. And yeah, the emergency fund was there to help to close that gap. But one of the things that I discovered when I became disabled was that I had used up most of my short-term disability insurance. So I only had 2 weeks left of short-term disability.
Okay.
And the long-term disability would not kick in for 6 months.
Okay.
So my daughter...
How long does short-term disability last?
It's going to vary by company. So I would recommend someone listening to this to say, go to your company and say, how long does my short-term disability last? When does my long-term disability kick in? And how long does it last? Those are legitimate questions that you want to be asking your organization. Mine lasted 6 months, but I had used it up for other reasons prior to my car accident. And so when I had the accident, I had 2 weeks of salary and maybe 2 weeks of vacation pay. But fortunately, I'm a big proponent of insurance. And so one of the things that I did to prepare, besides having emergency fund, was to have a supplemental long-term disability insurance policy. And I just want to, for those who probably don't know what a long-term disability insurance policy is, if you lose your income, this insurance policy will kick in and it will cover your income. So for me, that disability was going to kick in 6 months. But I had purchased, and it was 60% of my salary. So I needed to close that gap between the 60% of my salary and the 40% that I was not getting while my daughter became ill, while I was now paying for treatment on my own because what I was getting was just not sufficient, while I was having to order Uber Eats because I couldn't cook, and while I had a tenant who stopped paying rent and having to cover that. But the long-term disability insurance policy that I had bought that was supplemental, and you can go out to any insurance company and purchase this policy. It covered almost 40% of my salary. So that the way I purchased it would kick in 3 months. So between my emergency fund and that long-term disability insurance policy kicking in 3 months, I was able to navigate my finances, but I definitely had to go back and retool my budget because everything changed for me then, and just figure out how I would be able to manage in terms of paying my bills during that time frame. And it's been 3 years. I've still not returned to work because I had to give up my job. And the long-term disability policy, it really helps to to cover that gap. And for somebody who is not prepared at all, the first thing that they want to do is, besides the emergency fund that we talked about, is go to their job and ask these questions to find out how well they're covered.
Okay.
And for someone who is self-employed, you obviously are not covered unless you go out and buy your own policy. So for a self-employed person, they want to go out and buy a long-term disability insurance policy and educate yourself about it first before you go out and buy it, but it could really save you from going to bankruptcy, because I just think about myself and think about how prepared I was financially. But when this accident hit, it was sort of like, oh my God, I really had to go back to the drawing board.
So what are some of your favorite tips to help people build emergency funds? Because it doesn't sound like fun.
I know.
But we need the fund. You see what I did? Fun. Either way. So what are some things that people can, so they're listening now and they're like, ooh, let me get my stuff together. So what can they start to do to start to build that fund?
So I sort of have like this almost checklist. The first thing that you want to do, start with your why. Why am I building an emergency fund? Because if you don't have a why, it's just sort of like, okay, why am I doing this? And what's your goal, right? So after that, the next tip is you do your budget, and then you identify the funds in your budget, and you should know how much you want your emergency fund to be. A lot of times you'll hear people say start with $1,000. And if that's what you could start with, you start with, but that's definitely not enough. So once you start identifying things in your budget, because that's the only way you're going to find extra cash. Most of us, we can't even find $400 to buy anything. So we don't have extra money laying around, right? So I'll harp this again, going back into your budget and identifying the extra spending and using those monies to start building your emergency fund. And I mean, you start slowly, you start with whatever you find initially, you set it up automated, as I mentioned before, and open a high yield savings account. Another thing I should mention is a lot of the high yield savings account, they have no minimum balance. So you can start with anything, any amount. You just have to have that. I think the mindset shift is that's the biggest tip that I could give, because once you shift the mindset and start thinking about what are my goals and what would happen if I become disabled, or if I have this emergency and I don't want to draw my credit card. Think about the fact that you don't want to be in debt forever. Think about all the reasons why you need this emergency fund. I don't want to become homeless. I don't want to be in debt forever. I don't want to always be using my credit card. How can I start then building it? I need to stop overspending on things that I don't need, that do not align with my goal. And I'm going to take that extra money and I'm going to build that emergency fund.
Oh, on that note, Tanya, TNT, I just realized she is my friend. Yeah. Tanya, so I like to always do a little wrap up for the girls and the guys who might, are listening, and they're like, "Ooh, what are some main takeaways?" So I used to be a teacher for a long time, and so I'm just like, "All right, so listen, look deep into my eyes, right? Let's talk about some of the things we learned from Tanya." So what we got from Tanya, tell me if I'm getting an A or not, like what I've learned from you. That one, everybody needs an emergency fund. It's just necessary. That ideally you want to do 6 months or more. I mean, if you could start with the 3 months, working toward that, it's better to start than not.
Yes.
Start with that budget, not just because I'm the budgetnista, because that's what Tanya said too. So start with that budget first and eliminate some of your excess spending. Put it in a high yield savings, because child, that's where you're going to get the best interest rate. Yeah. And do not underestimate the value of having long-term insurance. That if you don't know what kind of insurance your job offers, you need to find out today. Yeah. And if you have to get some supplemental, do it. It's important. How did I do?
Excellent.
I got an A for us. My twin said I did good. I don't care what you think. No, I do care what you think. Tanya, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
And so we hope that if you need any additional financial advice, education, etc., that you go on all over to getgoodwithmoney.com. I am Tiffany, the budgetista, your favorite financial educator, and this is Money Globe from Yahoo Finance. You can find me here every single Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm available at yahoofinance.com and wherever you listen to any sort of podcast, hopefully this one. And we'll be back next week. And remember that you're an adult. Unexpected things happen, but you can be prepared if you start now. Until next week. Bye.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.